Hey everyone, we are 3 days out of the start of the Summer 2021 Proving Grounds tournament, which is a really exciting time. We've wrapped up the LCS finals. We've got a month to go before World starts. And so now it's a really good opportunity to focus on this tournament, which is a showcase for players in the academy and amateur ecosystem who are trying to make that step into the LCS, trying to be kind of the next big young player to move up. And so it's a great time, I think, to give people a preview of what to expect in Proving Grounds, the names of some players to watch, and also just in general track, who's been making progress throughout the year and might be that next kind of breakthrough player, the next young North American or North American resident at least player to make a big splash in the LCS. So I'm going to be looking through my top 10 North American prospects list today. And I want to mention up front that there are some players whose names you might expect that I'm not going to have on the list, either because they have a certain amount of pro level experience already, so like an Eyla or an Eyla who have played at the pro level enough that I don't really consider them potential rookies to come in. I don't think technically either of those players would be rookies. A little bit of a Fudge scenario, but both of them have more experience than Fudge did. You were not going to be seeing a player like Takeover, who is not a domestic player. And so players that are, I'm focusing on players who would be rookies coming into the LCS. I'm not sure for certain players if they've played enough LCS games to break through that tendency. So I'm not being really strict and rigid on this guideline, but I'm trying to apply it in a reasonable way. And you're not going to be seeing any players who would be import status. The focus on this is North America's top prospects. So that's what I'm going to be looking at. The way that I've done this is, let's go through a little bit of my methods for how I'm going to run this list. And hopefully this will give you some names to follow if you haven't been watching Academy or Amateur all year. If you come into Proving Grounds now, you're going to have an idea of which players to kind of watch the most closely, to be most excited about, to follow their storylines. So let's talk about my methods here. So first of all, I've rated each of these players based on what I see as their current performance level combined with their peak potential. So what do I see, if they're, based on the other players they're competing against, how are they playing right now at a certain quality level, which has to factor in, their consistency and, how will they perform from game to game. Whereas their peak potential is more, when everything is working out for them, how good can they be, and how many, what kind of signs do I see of what kind of player they could become with more experience and more coaching and, scrim time at the LCS level or whatever else it's going to be. So this is a difficult thing to estimate, but I've applied some kind of approaches to, what kind of variance I see in what their outcomes might be, how much, if things really don't work out, maybe they'll end up at this level. If things work out perfectly, maybe this is what I see as, how high they might be able to reach. But of course, assessing their potential is not a guaranteed thing of they are going to become this good. I mean, they could, these outcomes are hard to predict, but I've given it my best estimate of how good I think they might be able to become. I've put together these ratings based on not any kind of a statistical approach, really, which, depending how much of my content you watch, you might expect that I've come in and I've got some kind of like models that estimate how good they're going to be. No, that's not how I do this at all. I watch every single Academy game, and I have for the past 2 years. I take very detailed notes. I especially track which players have stood out game to game, and how well were they, a really, really great performance or pretty good, or just some good things in there mixed with some bad things, and I really track and follow this week to week and game to game very closely. I also have a lot of conversations with pro scouts and analysts in the scene to kind of test my my takes against, see who's standing out to them. Are there players that I've kind of been overlooking, because it can be very difficult to track all 10 players in a game to the level that that you'd really want. So sometimes I'll go back and I'll rewatch some things if they say, "Oh, did you notice this player?" And I happen not to notice that one so much. And then I do a little bit of assumption testing against the player's stats. If I've got the sense that this player's laning really well, and I might go and check the numbers and see, does it validate what I think or not? Do I need to reassess, the ways that you typically would use player stats? Either to point you to something that you need to watch for, or to test your opinions against and see whether it holds up. So those are kind of the ways that I've done this, but this is mostly based on very detailed notes and kind of like qualitative analysis rather than just seeing who has the better stats. Definitely not much of that in this approach. And then the overall rankings are a combination of the current rating I've given them and the potential rating I've given them, and just add those two together. And then if there's a tiebreaker between players, I'll use their current level as the tiebreaker because that's an amount of improvement that they've already shown, and I think that counts for a little bit more than the amount of improvement I think they may be able to show in the future. So how do the ratings work? We can look at that. So I've got a rating on a 1 to 10 scale. When I give a 10, I see that, and these are not like really strict labels, but I'm using a 10 to mean basically they could be an LCS MVP candidate. 9 would be they could be a first team All-Pro candidate, second team All-Pro for 8, third team All-Pro for 7. So basically anything from 7 up is like a very good player. 6 would be kind of, I see them as like a mid-range LCS player, not probably going to go on an All-Pro team, but definitely somebody that you can move forward with. 5 would be kind of a fringe, like they may be in and out of the LCS, but they're going to be part of the upper range of Academy. 4 would be kind of a mid-level Academy player. 3 would be kind of a lower tier Academy player. 2 would be upper tier amateur player who maybe not quite enough to make it into Academy. And then 1 would be kind of a lower tier amateur player. So those, again, these are not really strict and rigid labels, but it's kind of a relative way to kind of judge. If I throw a number on a player and I go, okay, so if I give them a 6, do I think they are mid-level LCS? Okay, yes or no? Oh, maybe they feel more like a 5. It's just kind of a helpful kind of rubric to use. So booking big out of the way. Well, and maybe just another way to help with these ratings a little bit. If I look back, and of course it's not perfect to look back to what ratings I would have given. I wasn't using the system, but like a year ago, let's say at the end of 2021 spring, what would I have given Danny in this? And I don't mention here, but I also give them a variance rating, low, medium, or high, based on their likelihood to kind of reach the potential that I see, or to exceed it or to underperform it. So if they have high variance, if I give them an 8 for potential, but I say high variance, then maybe they could end up as good as a 10. Maybe they might only end up as a 6, and low is like, okay, I'm pretty sure this is where they're going to be. So Danny at the end of 21 spring, looking back, I think I probably would have rated him a 4 in current. I thought he was kind of a mid-level Academy player, which, he overachieved what my expectation would have been, but I would have given probably an 8 in potential. Because I thought that he had the potential to grow a lot. He grew very, very quickly, and I probably would have given him an H for a high variance as well. And he grew very quickly and reached kind of the high level of that variance almost right away. Another example, at the end of 2020, Fudge, I probably would have given him a 5 or a 6 in current level. 6 if I was being generous, 5 if I was being a little more reserved, an 8 or a 9 in potential, because I really saw high levels that he could reach. And probably a medium level variance. I was pretty confident that he'd reach into that 8 or 9 level. One other example, if I'm looking back and kind of guessing what I would have given Spica at the end of 2020, I probably would have given him a 6 on current level. And then, if you go back and watch the Run It video I did on him after the summer finals last year, I said in that video, I think he could be contesting for a first team All-Pro, so I would have given him a 9 in potential and probably a medium variance on him as well. So those are just, some comparisons that you can give. When I give some of these numbers on here, how do they compare to, what Tim would have given Spica or something like that. So I don't know if that's useful, but just some examples of looking back what I might have said. So let's get into it. Let's get into the list, and we're going to start with player number 10 and work our way all the way up to number 1. So player 10 is Tony top laner for Evil Geniuses Academy. He is a very high skill kind of a top laner. Loves to duel, loves to play, the Jax, the Fiora, go 1v1, try to make his mark on the game. I think he's right now playing around that kind of mid-academy level, but he's got potential to get up into, I see kind of a third-team All-Pro kind of a range. I think he's fairly high variance just because he does play that very hands-focused, in your face, wants to fight you all the time kind of a style, which can work out very well, but you do have to learn to harness that. And I appreciate that a lot about players. I like high variance kinds of players at this level. So I think he's definitely a player to watch for. And in Proving Grounds, depending who he's up against, could be very, very fun player to keep an eye on. Player number 9, Fire, who right now is a free agent. He won Proving Grounds in spring with no org. He's a mid laner. Right now, I think he's about a 5. I think he could be competing kind of a lower level of the LCS mid laners right now, potentially. He's been around the amateur scene for a few years and, has been winning a lot and being very successful. He had a brief stint in academy as kind of an emergency sub for EG in 2020. I believe it was 2020 summer, might have been spring. And I think he looked pretty good there. I think hasn't had as much access as he could to kind of pro level coaching. So I think there is some room he can grow, but, given the amount of time he's been around and the progress he's made over that, I see him as the potential for kind of a mid-range LCS player. So a player who definitely could, he could exceed that potential for sure. And when I put these potential ratings on, this is not some kind of a cap on them. They can increase if they continue to grow and improve, I could definitely increase the potential that I see for them. But based on what I've seen out of Firefire right now, I see him as a top 10 prospect. And I think he could become, a usable LCS player for sure. Player number 8, Tomo from FlyQuest. He's a bot laner. We have seen him in LCS a bit, and this is one where I'm not sure technically if he would be a rookie if he starts in LCS again next year. I think he used up his rookie status this year, but I think given that he spent most of his time in academy, I still think he's worth having on this list. I think he's playing around kind of a low-level LCS player right now, kind of similar to Firefire, but he's actually had the opportunity to show it. And I think he could improve a little bit and become a mid-range LCS player. I'm not sure if he could break into that kind of all-pro conversation, but I think there's enough opportunity for it that he's definitely worth featuring on this list. And I, would be happy to see him get an LCS shot and try to grow into that for sure. Player number 7 is Pretty of Immortals. Now this is one where I can see some interesting takes or conversation around whether he should be included in the list. He has Oceanic residency, which he gained this year. After or previously having European residency, playing in the Greek League and a couple other ERLs. But I think, the fact that he hasn't played in a Worlds qualifying league yet, other than, I think a one game, he just had the one game in LCS this year. I think it's worth discussing him. He's been around quite a while through all these different leagues. But he's a good mid laner. I think right now he would be an upgrade in LCS for a couple of teams. I think he is kind of a mid-range LCS player if he was surrounded with the right teammates to show it. I think on Immortals it's been very difficult for him to stand out, but he often has impressed me, as you would know if you followed Academy standouts or anything like that. On the downside of him, I think he's near his potential level already, which is not a reason to not bring him into the LCS, but it's just a point there that I think he's probably he's one of the best players of the current level right now in the academy system entirely, and so that's why I put kind of a low variance on him. I think again, this is not to say that he can't get better than he is right now, but I think he's a player for sure who could be competing in LCS. Player number 6, Prismo from Golden Guardians, so another bot laner. This is a guy who I've been talking about for quite a while. I thought he could have been in the LCS very easily this year. Could have been getting that chance as kind of a lower end LCS bot laner who can grow into more. I think he has the potential to grow into, I'm giving him a 7 on potential, which is that kind of third team all pro kind of a range. I do think that it's kind of a lower variance on him, that he's not likely to exceed that 7, but I think if you put him in, I was really hoping actually that Golden Guardians would give him a shot either in spring or summer split this year, but I think they wanted the veterancy of Stixay to kind of anchor some of the other young pieces they had in there. But Prismo is going to be, he's the anchor of their academy team for sure. He's really a strong performer. He was playing Ziggs before it became kind of more meta for everybody else in the bot lane. Really, really interesting player, and I really hope we get to see him make his jump next year into the LCS. So we're getting into the top 5 here. This is where things I think get really exciting, and the levels start to jump up a bit. Tenacity of 100 Thieves. So this is a top laner. You would have heard, if you have been following Academy and Amateur for a while, you would have heard a lot about him a year ago when he was on 100 Thieves Next, and he and Kenvi were really kind of tearing things up. Tenacity was playing the really hard carrying kind of top laners and being really aggressive and influenced the game a lot that way. And something that impressed me a lot coming into Academy for 2021 is he kind of shifted up his approach and started taking on a lot more of the tanks and kind of the role-playing, mentality that in the LCS, top laners can't just rely on being a carry only player all the time. And so you could see he made a very conscious effort to adjust his champion pool and start to bring in this other kind of like, let's learn the pro game. Let's learn what someone like an Impact or a Someday can do when they're not just getting resources all the time. How do they play without resources? And so, we saw a lot of Volibear or Gragas or things like this. And it was really impressive to see him bring in that mentality. And I think a really good sign of maturing into what a top laner needs to do to get into the LCS. On the downside of that, I think there was some little bit of loss of that aggression, and I would have liked to see a little bit more of an even mix maybe. And I think, his potential is pretty high. I have him in that 7 level on potential. I think if he can start to bring back a little bit more of that aggressive carry mentality and start to balance those two out a little better, that's when we're going to see the best out of him. And so I am very excited for his future. I think I hoped to see a little bit more movement forward, and that maybe not just bringing in kind of the tank play, but I think he could be coming into 2021. I probably would have expected or hoped to see him in the top 3 of this list rather than 5. And so it sounds like I'm coming across very critical, which I don't really intend, but this is a player I guess I'm trying to justify because other people will probably expect to see him in top 3. Why I have him at 5. 5 is a very, rank 5 on this list. Very exciting. And Tenacity is a player who I think we definitely will see him in the LCS. I'm not sure if it'll be next year. I think there will be a lot of conversations about both within 100 Thieves about, is this the year? Hey, we just won the championship with Someday. Are we going to shift that up and bring Tenacity up? Are we willing to let him go to another org, and for what kind of price tag? There are going to be a lot of very difficult conversations around what to do with Tenacity in his future. So a top laner to be very excited about. But again, just mentioning on his playstyle, watch for him in the way he plays, the subtleties of the top lane role, playing without resources. Of course, the meta is very topside focused these days, so maybe we'll see him going back a little bit more to that in Proving Grounds. Number 4, Will of Dignitas. Now, here's a player whose current level I've got at a 4, right? So that's mid-range academy level. He's a jungler, the first jungler we have on this list. But his potential is, I think, so higher than anybody else we've talked on the list so far. What we've seen this split, he came in to Dignitas Academy when all of their shuffling happened with dropping Dardoch, moving Acadian up, and they brought in Will. He's I'm pretty sure he's 17 right now. He came in and is playing these very hands-oriented, mechanical, high resource carry junglers. Especially see him doing a lot of things on Viego and then Xin Zhao as well, and just playing out fights so well, executing his plays really well. And that's what has really caught my eye right off the bat. I was thinking, okay, who they brought in some kind of random kid here. Who is this? I didn't know anything about him. I don't really scout out of solo queue directly, but obviously Dig do. They brought him in, and right off the bat, he was catching my eye on these things. The reason that I give him a 4 on a current performance rather than a 5 or better is that I think there are certain subtleties of the pro game that he's still picking up. Things like how to balance between his pathing efficiency and his gank timings, while also balancing that against the objective control and the vision game and some of those things that you don't really get an opportunity to learn in solo queue. It takes a lot longer in competitive play with pro level coaching to figure out how to play some of those team aspects of the game, setting up those objectives and playing for the macro part of the game, but that will come with time. No pun intended. And I can see that there has already been improvement in it. And when you go to the kind of the skirmishing and fighting and just, execution level of his play, it's so good already. He really had a breakout performance in Unified Grand Prix to help Dignitas in that tournament. And I can't wait to see what he's going to do in Proving Grounds. I think we're going to see him spend a full year in Academy next year, but 2023 and maybe if 2022 goes really well, I think this guy's going to break into LCS, and I think he's got potential to be a real future star. Very, very excited about Will's future, and Dignitas have a real gem here, I think. Player number 3, top 3 now, NXI of FlyQuest. So NXI is someone who when you balance out, as I said, I made these rankings based on a combination of current level and potential, and he's a little bit of the inverse of Will in that sense, that he's playing right now so much of a complete game, and he has had a little bit of that time in LCS when FlyQuest are figuring out between him and Jose Diota what do they want to be doing. NXI really has impressed me this year. He came out of Scouting Grounds last year. FlyQuest picked him up, and I thought, okay, here's a player who had a really, really great Scouting Grounds. Looks like there's something very interesting here. But how much is he going to grow over the course of 2021? And his growth has been so impressive, just week to week, month to month, leveling up, being really consistent, being really solid, picking up all of the balanced elements of the gameplay that I was just talking about with Will. NXI, I think, has picked up a lot of those very well. The reason, so I put him at a 6 right now. I think he can play at kind of a mid-range LCS jungler kind of a level right now. I put his potential only at a 7. I think maybe that's a little conservative. When you add this up, that's a 13, and that's the same as Will. But of course, I've got giving him the tiebreaker on the current performance because we've already seen him get there. But you could argue him into an 8 on potential without making too much of a stretch. I think it's going to be. I think I need to see a little bit more of the dynamism that I get from some of these other players before I'm comfortable boosting his potential up into the 8 range or higher. But I already see him as a player who, if you've watched my Armchair GM sessions for FlyQuest, I think they should be building their 2022 roster around NXI, giving him a chance to grow into that the all-pro conversations kind of a player. So I'm very positive on NXI. I've been so impressed with his growth this year. And what he's gained from the FlyQuest coaching staff. I think he's been a big driver of kind of the success that academy team has had, despite all the roster shuffles in and out. And I think Proving Grounds will be a chance for him to make a strong argument that he should be the jungler of the future for FlyQuest. So I'm sure they'll all be watching very closely to see what kind of statement he makes about whether he should be starting in the LCS for them next year. Personally, I think if I was making the choice right now, I probably would say he should be their starter next year. So top 2, people who have been following the scene. I think you know already who the top 2 players are going to be. And the question is, what order am I going to put them in? And I really struggled with what order to put these 2 players in. At the end of the day, I did decide to make a tiebreaker based on current level. And to say potential was kind of the second side of this, but really this is a matter of one player, and I'm sure I've said this before in public contexts, but there's one player here who I think is more LCS ready, and one player who I think has higher potential, right? So that means that the player with the higher potential in this case is going to be rank number 2, and that is where I landed. So rank 2 on my North American top prospects list is Jojo Pyun of Evil Geniuses. So this is a mid laner. If I could have a variance rating higher than high, maybe extreme, I might apply that to Jojo, because just the way he plays is so wild and aggressive, which I kind of love. It is something that I guess you could say I have a bias in favor of, but he's willing, especially in academy level play. When you get into LCS, you have to tighten up, right? And I'm being a little loose with how I'm using the word variance here, but because I'm talking about the variance in his individual play rather than in these ratings. It's about the variance of potential outcomes in their career trajectory. But he plays in such a way that he's willing to try it. He's willing to trust his hands to take a 50-50 play, but his hands are so good that he's making it a 60-40 when it doesn't really deserve to be. I think he has 10 potential. I'm so excited about what this player can do with the just mechanical execution that he brings out, with the range of champion pool he plays as a 17-year-old. He turned 17 this year, so he actually came in EG Academy as a 16-year-old and turned 17 partway through the year. The fact that he can dominate lane on Lulu and carry games that way, the fact that he can also go in and play the Bruisers, play a Renekton really well, snowball a game on LeBlanc. He can play all these different styles, and he plays them all very kind of recklessly in a sense. But he just has so much confidence in himself. There might be a bit of a knock against him that EGA have always played into his lane a lot and enabled him. But when you've got a player with this level of individual skill, that's what you do, right? You make them the center of your game plans. And that's something that he's going to have to learn and improve on, is that he's not always going to be the best player on his team, right? If he comes up into the LCS, and I think EG are looking at him in Proving Grounds, and with Jizuke going to free agency, they will be looking at Jojo and saying, is he ready? This is a big risk. This kid's 17. Are we going to make a 17-year-old, our mid lane LCS starter? Doing it in bot lane is one thing. Are we going to do it in mid lane? They're going to be looking at him and trying to decide, if I see his current performance level as kind of fringe LCS, just largely because he does make some of these very aggressive, trusts in his hands a little too much kind of decisions. It gets himself in trouble. He's used to getting so many resources from his jungler and from his support to some extent. Is this too much of a risk for us? Maybe we give him another year in academy to kind of mature that much more. I think Proving Grounds is very much an opportunity that EG management are going to be making this decision about him. But there's so much there that if he's not in LCS next year, he will be the year after. He is going to be, I think, if there's no guarantee. I do see a high variance on his potential career outcomes. But if things go fairly well, he's going to be an LCS star for years to come, which is not something you typically see out of the mid lane. We have 2 other mid laners in this top 10 list so far. Both of them, I think, have the potential to be kind of mid-range LCS players. This is a player who has the potential to be the best mid laner in the LCS if things work out well in his favor. And so that's part of why it's so exciting, is that you don't really find that in the mid lane in the NA talent pool. NA mid laners has been a bit of a meme for years. And so Jojo, I think, has the potential to change that. But he does still have a lot of growth to do. One interesting fact about his development this year is that he has been learning to shot call, which is a lot of responsibility to put on a 17-year-old rookie. I'm curious how much that has affected his individual play at times, and if he's still working on that and learning through it, obviously, and growing for that. Would he become a shot caller at the LCS level if he moved up? I don't know. But in general, I think there's just, this is the kind of super high potential player that you want to watch in Proving Grounds. So keep your guys close on him. And this leaves us to the number 1 top prospect in North America, which most of you are going to know who it is, and it's Kenvi of 100 Thieves. So the 3rd jungler on this list, 3rd jungler in the top 4, which I don't know, maybe I'm just pro jungle. Maybe I have a jungle bias, but Kenvi, I think, is playing better than any of these other prospects. I put him at a 6, not at a 7, which I think would have been a little too generous to say that, I think he could be a 3rd team All-Pro right now. Maybe call it a 6.5 if you want. He's playing around the same level or slightly better than NXI, I think. But his potential, the amount of kind of active carrying he does, the amount he controls games is you can see some more signs that I think he can exceed NXI. I think he can be, given a year or 2 of development in the right environment and good coaching, he can be kind of a 1st team All-Pro level jungler. If you remember back to when I was saying, how would I have rated some of these former players? At the end of 2020, when Spica had put in a full year, or a full split rather, in the LCS, and also had that brief appearance in playoffs the year before, I'm pretty sure I would have given Spica a 6.9, and I've given Cavendish a 6.9 without more than just the one kind of meaningless LCS game at the end of the summer regular season. This is a guy who I think can be on that level. There's just, he's been growing all year long. He's been developing, I think, maintaining that kind of killer aggression attitude, wanting to be the guy who really is asserting himself on the map. And he hasn't lost any of that over the year, but he has definitely kind of learned a little bit more how to control and how to be the person directing the pace of the game. Working with some really good teammates on 100 Thieves Academy and getting coaching from Golden Glue to kind of to grow up there. And this is where, again, I said earlier with Tenacity, the 100 Thieves have some very difficult decisions to make in their off season, which is a good place to be in. And with Kenvi, it's that and even more so. I think Kenvi and Tenacity came up with as this duo at 100 Thieves Next. And I think Kenvi has always stood out a little more to me as the player of that duo who really has that potential to blow up and become a big LCS talent. Both of them together, I think, have always worked very well. And I'm curious, very, very curious if 100 Thieves, now that they've won the LCS and they're going to Worlds, and, it'll depend what happens at Worlds to some extent, what happens in Proving Grounds, but would they want to promote Kenvi and Tenacity together? Obviously, they're a great duo, and they are a duo who, given enough continued growth, can win the LCS in the future, in multiple years in the future. But you've got Closer as your starter right now, and he was the best player in the playoffs, and he, a lot of people voted for him as an MVP candidate, and do you promote Kenvi behind that? Man, that's... But do you allow a player like Kenvi to go to another org in the LCS and win them titles in the future, potentially, if you can't, if you think he's just that good, which I'm sure that their opinion of him is at least as high as mine. I don't know what they're going to do. I know that selfishly, I really, really hope that Kenvi will be in the LCS next year one way or another. I think he's more than good enough for it. I think he's very, very ready, and I think he can only grow from here. When I give him a potential rating of 9 and a medium variance, not a high variance, the only other 9s or 10s I've given here were Will and Jojo Pion, who are both a little bit younger and a lot higher variance. But my confidence in Kenvi to hit that 9 is that much more kind of rock solid than either of those players, because I see it already. So Kenvi, number one prospect, I think, to watch in Proving Grounds, number one prospect to watch going into 2022 and beyond. And I just can't wait to see what he'll achieve in the LCS for the long-term future. So that's my top 10 top prospects. Tony Top, 5Fire, Tomo, Pretty, Prismal, Tenacity, Will, NXI, Jojo Pion, and Kenvi. I do want to just take a minute at the end here to highlight some other players who I think might go into that kind of the next level down of these players. Other players who are going to be very much worth watching in Proving Grounds. So here are 11 other names that I think I considered, but had a little bit below this top 10 grouping. So Bradley out of Wildcard Red, a mid laner. Busio, a support who role swapped from mid for this year, was playing with 100 Thieves next and then got promoted into Academy, but won't be playing. He'll be behind Poom, who is also on this list. And I imagine that Busio will be the starting support for 100 Thieves Academy next year, as he continues to kind of grow into his new role. Copy is a player who also came out of the 100 Thieves Next system, but was playing for Cloud9 Academy this year, and has some pretty interesting things about the way he plays. XU is on Cloud9 Amateur, a jungler who, one of these high resources carry junglers who does a lot of impressive things, and want to see how he can put it all together, and how he can grow into the pro game some more. Philip is a very young top laner who... just anytime you see a player this young come into Academy and you want to see how much they're going to grow over time. And I've seen some pretty interesting things there that he got attacked a lot by enemy teams, and that can make you look bad. But I think he's got some really good signs that you should be paying attention to here, see how much he can learn, and we'll definitely be seeing him grow a lot more next year, I think. Puma, I already mentioned. You are familiar with him from a little bit of time in the LCS before, but I think he's an NA support, which is a rare thing to find. So he and Busio both. Hard to find really exciting NA supports. And when you've got one, you want to definitely see where you can go with him. And I think he was one of the stronger supports in Academy this year. Rosethorn, jungler for Golden Guardians Academy. I think he showed some pretty good growth this year. And I think he had a really good jungle duel with Will in Unified Grand Prix. So keep your eyes on him. He's a really good ganking jungler, especially. So watch for him. Spawn from Dig Academy in the bot lane. He's like both in personality and in playstyle. He's kind of a quiet, solid kind of a player, but somebody who is worth having your eyes on a little bit more. Tomio is an Evil Geniuses jungler who is promoted from the Evil Geniuses Prodigies team into Academy in order to allow contracts to focus more of his attention on the LCS team. Again, another one of these kind of like high resources, high mechanics junglers who you have to see how much he's going to learn the pro game, and how much he's going to learn to work with Jojo Pion and the rest of the team and Tony Top for that matter. So, given that he only had a little bit of time with EGA so far, he played with them in the playoffs after kind of contracts played out the last couple of weeks of the regular season while Tomio was with the team, and then Tomio stepped in for playoffs and still has that room to grow. But over the last few weeks, we'll want to see how much he's continued to learn and improve with that extra scrim time and the attention from the EG coaching staff. Wixie is a bot laner for Cloud9 Amateur. he's a very strong mechanics kind of bot laner. There are a lot of players in the bot lane, I think, who are worth discussing. I could throw out a lot of other names, Team Luke and Meech and so on, but Wixie is the one who tends to catch my eye the most. So watch for him with Cloud9 Amateur. XU is also Cloud9 Amateur. I don't think I mentioned. So that pairing for that team, very exciting to keep your eyes on. And Jan for TL Academy has had a pretty strong pairing with Eyla on TLA. And again, does a lot of solid, clean, good things. Kind of similar to Spawn, but I think a little bit different play style between the two of them. But he's another player just to keep your eyes on. Not all of these players will be visible in Proving Grounds, or maybe will have many games in Proving Grounds as they come up against some good competition right off the bat. But these are 11 other players who didn't make my top 10 list, but are very much worth keeping an eye on for the future. So that's it. That's my North American top prospects top 10. Kind of a top 21 in a sense, but the top 10 is the focus here. So hope you found it interesting. Hope you found it enjoyable. Looking for lots of discussion around this and see how all of these players perform at Proving Grounds. And of course, the outcomes of their team are not necessarily going to be what tell you the most about their potential or their performance as an individual player. But so try to look past if any of these players get knocked out of the tournament early. Look at how well they played individually, and of course how well they've been playing throughout the year. And I think we'll be seeing a lot of these names, whether they're in LCS or Academy next year, but for some years to come. So thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed it.